The war was over. The brigade had won. They now had complete control over most of the server, establishing themselves at spawn. ZombieDwarf and Iceland became collaborators with the new regime, assisting them in their occupation. Blake took over Lopez's old house, making it into Greg's tomb, a replacement for the original that was burned up by Jambo. Far from spawn, the resistance had survived, with Lopez and Dennis building a new base. This was their forever land, a base of operations to one day strike back against the brigade. Following the war, they had raided a major brigade stash, stealing all of the items. This made them pretty powerful, but it would not be enough to directly confront the brigade and Blake. Instead, they spent most of their time building up a new home, knowing that they might not be getting back to spawn anytime soon. Secretly, Zombie had been collecting intelligence for Lopez, telling them where all the major stashes were. Lopez had also kept in contact with Josh, and together, they had both raided many of the brigade stashes. This would slowly begin to deplete their equipment, but this was about to be the smallest of everybody's worries. Using the items gained from the raids, Lopez and Dennis had embarked on a mission to slowly but surely reduce the brigade's authority over spawn. They could not just simply retake it, but they could make quite the statement with the stacks of TNT they'd stolen. They decided to strike the brigade's spawn defense tower, which ZombieDwarf had been forced to build by the occupiers. This would be a symbolic victory for the rebels, showing everybody that the brigade was incapable of defending spawn. This made the brigade rethink their strategy. Due to their lack of gear, they might not be able to fight the entire server once again, but if they divided up their enemies and then made them turn on each other, the job would be much, much easier. At the meeting, Farkie and Blake negotiated with Lopez, but they did not make clear their secret intentions that would come from letting Lopez return to spawn. Their sinister actions had been covered up by the announcement of the first takeaway ball, hosted by Blake and Shay. Seemingly just a celebration of peace and prosperity, the ball was secretly something else. It had become an important step in pacifying spawn, winning a propaganda victory for the brigade, as well as serving to capture Josh under false pretenses of peace. Blake had also been hard at work constructing the prison, which would hold Josh forever. If all went according to plan, it was inescapable. The ball began, with everybody meeting outside the brand new ballroom, which the brigade had forced Zombie to build. Even Josh had arrived, despite the lack of peace between him and the brigade. Everybody gathered inside, grabbed drinks, and socialised. Everything was going according to the plan. Farkie and T5 had entered the ballroom with everybody else. However, Ben waited nearby, ready to strike when the time was right. Blake gave a speech, apologising to Josh for everything that had happened. But this was all a distraction, as Ben arrived at the front door. T5 armoured up, and Farkie pulled out his firework launcher. The explosions abruptly stopped the celebrations. They had finally caught him, with nowhere to run this time. Farkie threatened the rest of the room, warning them that if they were to help Josh, the brigade who was surrounding the building would destroy them. Josh was escorted out of the ballroom, through the nether, and to the prison. Josh was locked away, permanently this time. The brigade's plan had worked, but if the plan had been foolproof, this video would be over. As soon as the trap had begun to unfold at the ballroom, Zombie had drunk a potion of invisibility, hiding so he could plot his next move. He had followed them all through the nether and straight into Josh's cell. Zombie wasted no time in mining the walls of the cell. However, realising that they were surrounded on almost all sides by lava, Zombie chose to go down. This way, the two could escape through the floor. The brigade, which had just heard sounds of mining, quickly ran to investigate, realising their worst fears had come true. They quickly travelled down the hole that Zombie had dug to try and find out who had helped Josh escape. Blake's inescapable prison had been outsmarted. Zombie gave Josh his trident, allowing him to escape as fast as possible, gaining thousands of blocks of distance. This meant the brigade were completely unable to find Josh. Brigade began to round people up at spawn, with Iceland actually helping them to conduct an investigation. They spent hours asking people, but everybody told a different lie. It was almost like this was coordinated. The investigation proved to be unsuccessful, leaving more questions than answers. Both Blake and Farkie knew that a change of strategy was needed. They could no longer rely on brute force to maintain their dwindling control of spawn. The conflict with Josh was entering its 5th month, and continued to seem unwinnable. If the brigade were to maintain control, they would need to do it freely and fairly, without using war as a weapon. They would need to come to the negotiating table with Josh. So, the brigade did what the brigade do best. Using the coordinates that they had bribed Jambo to give them, they threatened that if Josh did not return to spawn for negotiations, they would destroy his base. When Josh refused, they did exactly that, using stacks of TNT to send his base into history. After the dust settled, Josh was given little other choice but to go to spawn and negotiate. Although the atmosphere was tense, there was relief that the war was coming to an end. For the first time in months, there would be no more conflict. Little to their knowledge, Lopez had just tried but failed to assassinate the brigade. This was a protest against the brigade's actions over the past few months, which Lopez was sick of. The fight wasn't over until the brigade were no longer welcome at spawn. Their illegal occupation had to end, but luckily for Lopez, one of the terms of the agreement with Josh was the brigade would allow free and fair elections to elect a new leader at spawn. This would decisively decide whether the people wanted the brigade at spawn or not. Zombie quickly made it clear that he wanted to run for president, and rightly so. He was probably the people's favourite, and even had backing from Lopez. Now that the brigade were pulling back from spawn, Zombie could be more open about his opinion. Therefore, his promises of restrictions on the brigade made him instantly popular. However, an alternative candidate quickly appeared. Blake, backed by the brigade, had also made it clear that he wanted to run for president. Whilst he was definitely not as popular as Zombie, he definitely still posed some sort of competition. The biggest worry to many people was what had happened to Greg's after Jambo had blown it up. The crater where Greg's once sat was now full of a red substance, known to be toxic to anything that touched it. But people were curious, and if Zombie could find out what was going on, maybe he could secure some more votes. However, he had been completely unprepared. The day of the election shortly followed. The two candidates would each make a speech before people voted. Blake went first, reiterating to the people that Greggs was here for Spawn's protection. He also stated the brigade was not exactly a threat, and that in the right circumstances, they could bring stability. Next up, it was time for the next candidate, Zombie. Where is Zombie? That is what everyone thought when Kotek came to the stage and announced that Zombie had gone missing. Kotek, as his vice president, would reiterate Zombie's policies and attempt to win the election for him. However, then a fully armoured zombie emerged from the backdrop, immediately slaughtering several people in the crowd. This caused chaos, and the brigade immediately scrambled to try and defend themselves. However, it was Kotek that would eventually calm Zombie down and bring him back to his senses. It was then that Zombie exposed Blake for what he had done, blaming Blake for the events that had just happened due to his capture and experimentation on Zombie and the red substance which had infected him. The collective decision was then made that the election should be called off, for now, and that Blake should be banned from all future elections. Many people were incredibly dissatisfied by this, especially Kotek, who was beginning to have doubts in the system. Returning to the brigade base, Farkie had sympathised with Zombie, and the red should not be used like that. He understood how this could get out of control very, very quickly, and all of this was Blake's fault. However, Ben and T5 had supported Blake's decision, and proceeded to accuse Farkie of betraying their ally. Farkie quickly ran away from the brigade base, taking whatever supplies he could with him. Eventually, he built a brand new base in a flower forest, naming it Allium Vault, one of the most secure facilities on the server. Since Blake had been banned from running in all future elections, the brigade selected Jambo, after a lot of bribery, to be the face of their campaign. He would run in the next election, representing the brigade and their interests. One day in April, Lopez arrived back at their base, still living in Foreverland. However, they had an unexpected visitor. Farkie stood at their door, presenting his ideas and demands, informing Lopez that the brigade was on the brink of civil war. Blake would have to die for his crimes. Lopez would run for president to stop Jambo and the brigade. Farkie was offering them an alliance. Step 1. Blake must die for his crimes. Farkie had carefully planned out the date and location of Blake's assassination. To begin with, he would need to be lured back to spawn, so that Farkie could actually find him. Farkie would then scare Blake into leading him back to his secret base. Lopez was somewhat against killing Blake, but Farkie went ahead with it anyway. distracting Lopez and scaring Blake, sending him running to his secret base where Farkie followed him. The island of Bland was where Blake had kept Zombie and continued his work on the dangerous red substance. Because of this, the entire island was covered in the red. Farkie would have to be incredibly careful not to interact with it. Blake stood atop a small hill looking over the sunset. Believing that his greater leverage would give him the upper hand in negotiations, Blake gave Farkie an ultimatum. Either give up all his armor and weapons, and let Blake kill him, taking a life and ruining his reputation. Or Blake would join the brigade, arming them against Spawn, and with the power of the red, it would be easy for them to take control of the entire server. Blake felt in complete control. However, this was far from the case. The tables quickly turned when Farkie chose the third option that he made up himself. Blake saw it coming and accepted it.
I'm gonna die. Farkie.
I'll see you in hell. Farkie had just taken the final life of his old best friend. Blake would be permanently dead. However, the red worked in mysterious ways. Following Blake's passing, Zombie took over Greg's, moving its assets to a new location, and building a massive city. This would eventually become Greg City. It was designed to be a competing location to live at compared to Spawn, which had been ravaged by many wars. Many new citizens moved to the area, and it quickly became a prosperous town. Zombie had also begun construction of the brand new Giga Gregs, which would be responsible for managing all the operations of the business. It definitely would never have any other purpose, right? When they met the next day, Lopez had accepted Farkie's proposal to run for president, and in return, they suggested that Farkie would become their vice president. Alongside Jambo, Lopez would become the second candidate to run in the election. Zombie, being unable to run for president this time, chose to use a puppet ruler to attempt to take control of Spawn. He selected Anne, one of his citizens living in Greg City. When the election day arrived, all three candidates gave a speech before the voting began. It was clear from before the voting even began that Lopez was the favourite to win, and they managed to secure a landslide victory over the others. Lopez was now the president of Spawn, giving a speech to their people, promising peace and prosperity. Kotick then asked to give a speech. Lopez trusted him, and felt bad for him after the election was stolen from him last time. Kotick came to the podium, and began to question Lopez's rules and policies. What if they became another brigade? Kotick wanted to believe that Lopez would be a good president, but first, he wanted them to prove it to him. Lopez stood confused for a few seconds, and then it happened. Farkie pulled away as soon as he heard the TNT, while others weren't so lucky. The blast killed 4 people, and Lopez barely survived using a totem of undying. And Kotick was nowhere to be seen, vanished into thin air. Everybody at Spawn scattered, looking for Kotick, but it would be Lopez, Farkie and Dennis that would find Kotick alongside the brigade, waiting at Lopez's base. The brigade announced that they had helped Kotick to try and assassinate Lopez, but it had failed. Lopez was a strong leader that could rival the brigade, and this was a threat. They announced that Lopez's government was illegitimate and they did not recognize it, warning that this was not over, before leaving with Kotick. A new war was looming on the horizon, with tensions rising quickly, but the brigade would not be the ones to start it. In the following weeks, the rivalries continued to flare up, with Greg City promoting themselves as the prime place to live on the server. Many people, including Muddenly, switched sides, joining Greg's. In retaliation, Farkie offered a diamond block and a totem of undying to whoever decided to settle at Spawn. This enticed in new arrivals, such as Erica and Hulu. However, one night Lopez unexplainably lashed out, killing 3 people. This was not a good look for the president of Spawn, and really lowered public opinion. There was confusion about what actually happened, and nobody could quite figure it out. However, Farkie received a mysterious message, telling him to go to the Greg's boat, washed up near the battlefield of the First War. Thinking this might give him some answers, he went and investigated, but it shocked him what he found. Farkie initially pointed the blame for what happened to Lopez on Blake, but his old friend reminded him that Farkie had been the one to kill Blake, take the red from him and spread it to Lopez. Blake promised that he could help Farkie find a solution, whilst also bringing Lopez back to their senses, a much harder task than it seemed, considering the red had gained a much tighter hold on them. The two met almost daily to discuss their plans and what they would do next. Blake also highlighted Greg's as a massive threat. Zombie was still infected with the red, and that meant that he had immense power. All hell could break loose at any moment. The red made people aggressive and unpredictable. However, Lopez wasn't done attempting to find peace with Zombie and Greg's. They still remembered a time where Zombie and Lopez were the bestest of friends, always working together. All that had changed when the war happened. Lopez hoped to make Zombie remember, but it had backfired completely. Zombie shamed Lopez for their actions the other day, blaming them for the tragic death of those 3 people. Because of this incident, Zombie said that Lopez was completely unfit to be president. Zombie demanded that Lopez step down, and well, they did, but they handed power over to their vice president Farkie. This temporary arrangement would see Farkie have all the power of the president, displeasing Zombie, knowing that Farkie was also a strong leader. Zombie would have to do something radical to weigh the scales in his favour. Right now he was vulnerable to strong leaders and strong fighters like Lopez and Farkie, who are praying for his downfall. Out of his 26 plans, he had exhausted all but 2. This second to last plan involved Zombie gaining an upper hand, and to do so he would need a sacrifice. Zombie would lure Cosmics down into the basement of Grexity, where waiting was his most sinister creation. By utilising the power of the Conduit of Life, Zombie had made a canon-life farm. This would harvest the lives of innocent civilians, both in Grexity and around the server. And all of this so Zombie could get a few more lives to even the playing field. And Cosmics would be the first test subject. Sriracha, witnessing this happening and horrified by Zombie's actions, quickly ran to Farkie for help. They informed him that Zombie had gone insane. He was now sacrificing people for some unknown purpose. Farkie immediately ran to Blake. No more negotiations, no more stalling. They would have to act together and now. Nobody should have this much power, especially not their enemy. Their first plan of action was to capture Zombie peacefully and put him in a place where he would no longer be able to cause any trouble. This would give him the thinking time to decide what to do with him. And surprisingly, Zombie complied, not resisting at all until they reached the Greg's prison where Josh had been held months ago. Zombie then refused to cooperate, not wanting to go into a cell or take his armor off. However, Blake still felt in complete control of the situation. To his knowledge, Zombie only had 1 cannon life and was completely powerless. So powerless that Blake and Farkie hadn't even become prepared for a fight. Blake threatened Zombie, but then Zombie revealed the truth.
You didn't. You took his cannon life.
And you know what that means, don't you?
Oh, we are in the pit of Greg one, Farkie. This ends now.
I'm not gonna let you kill Farkie.
Zombie had ran away, leaving Dennis to be slaughtered by the 4 others. He had failed to destroy Farkie. Against all the odds, he had survived. Escalation to a full-scale war was now inevitable. Zombie would have to play his last card, his final plan. This had to work, because there was no other option. Lopez gathered whoever was left on their side at their base. The 6 of them were all that stood in the way of Zombie and complete world domination. If Zombie were to succeed, he could use the red for unimaginable purposes. But Zombie's army was twice the size theirs was, as well as the brigade, who were leaning towards Zombie, though still undecided. Farkie knew what he had to do. He had to mend an old wound, before new ones could be created. Zombie has gone completely insane. Greg's army was now preparing for an invasion of Spawn, helped by the brigade. Their army was now over double the size of Lopez and Farkie's. Zombies' propaganda had worked. These people thought they were liberating Spawn from tyranny, but Spawn's last defenders were not done yet. Farkie tried one last final time to rally people and embolden them with a speech. However, it was completely unsuccessful. Everybody knew that they would be destroyed. They were hopeless. However, hopelessness would not save them from what was to come. Zombies' army had set up camp at Kotuk's base, close to Spawn. All of their supplies and weapons were already there. If Farkie could take the initiative and destroy the supplies before they could attack Spawn, maybe he could hinder them. Farkie and Blake went to Kotuk's base to try and buy some time. Zombie and T5, who were preparing the supplies, were not expecting the ambush. Even worse, Farkie had killed Zombie's horse, disrupting their plan of travelling quickly around Spawn with them. When Zombie peeled away from the fight, Blake followed him, while Farkie continued to deal with T5. When the armies arrived at Spawn, everybody expected there to be a fight. However, in the absence of their leader, Spawn's defense simply just collapsed, and a standoff occurred instead. Farkie arrived back just in time to see everybody get splashed with invisibility. This created incredible confusion. In the moments following this, there was a short, awkward pause, before this was interrupted by a huge explosion, caused by TNT underneath the spawn portal that somebody had set off. As a result, a few people went to investigate, while some people's invisibility started to run out. As soon as Jambo became visible again, he was attacked by 3 invisible people, and as their invisibility ran out, it was revealed. Ben, Farkie and T5. The brigade were back. People at Spawn began to panic and run. The brigade began to disperse the situation and replace the flags at Spawn with their own. Lopez and Munnelly offered resistance against the brigade, however it was completely unsuccessful. They were forced to retreat by the brigade's superior firepower. And as quickly and easy as that, the brigade had staged an almost bloodless coup against Spawn. The Spawn government was no more. As Ben and T5 cleared up the mess at Spawn, Farkie went to help Blake. Together, they would stop Zombie and bring order to the server. Blake had been chasing Zombie for a long time through the Nether towards Greg's city. Blake was determined to steal back the conduit. That conduit had the power to change life and death itself. It was Blake's and he needed it. Zombie used armor stands to distract and slow down Blake. In the meantime, he would go grab some gear, ready for the fight to come. They both knew the stakes of this fight. Whoever would win would have the conduit and Greg's, and whoever lost was wiped from the history books forever. Farkie raced as fast as he could towards Greg's city to help Blake, but Lopez, fueled by rage, stood in his way. They had been betrayed, and they were furious. Farkie would have to die for causing this chaos, but most importantly, and at the least, Lopez would have to stop him from reaching Blake and helping him kill Zombie, taking the conduit, and taking control of the entire server. fighting abruptly stopped when Blake arrived, reminding them that he still needed them both alive so he could extract the red from them and dispose of it. Lopez realised that this was all for nothing. They had relentlessly fought off Farkie. For what? The outcome was still the same. Zombie was dead, and Blake had the ultimate power on the server in the palm of his hand. It was all for nothing. Blake took the both of them across the old battlefield where the first war had happened, and towards Greg's boat. The area held significance for all of them. This was where their future was written, and their past erased. Everything from that day had led them all to this moment. Blake instructed the two of them to put all their armor and tools in the chests. They would get it back once the procedure was over. Farkie and Lopez, fresh from the fight, were still cautious of each other. Blake prepared to kill the two of them and finally get rid of the red from both of them. He would kill Farkie first and then Lopez. However, Lopez snapped again, breaking the glass between them and Farkie and stabbing him with a concealed sword. As Lopez went for the chest, Blake stabbed them. Lopez was dead, opening their eyes to an unfamiliar white space, and ZombieDwarf. It was there that the two discussed what just happened. Former enemies, who had been enraged at each other for so long and fueled by the red, were now back to being themselves. The two of them were incredibly pessimistic of their chances of being able to overthrow the New World Order under Blake and the Brigade. Neither of them had seen Farkie about anywhere, and to top it all off, Zombie was only on one remaining life. But if there was any chance, any shot, any opportunity to take down Blake, they were going to take it. It was there that their plan was formed. A plan to bring down Blake, Greg's, the Brigade, and anybody else who stood in their way. A plan to bring things back to how they used to be. Before there was a Brigade, before there was a Greg's, before there was war and conflict. A plan to take it all back.